A 500-gram pack of beef mince now costs £5.27. That is the most a pack of mince has ever cost in this country, up by a third in a single year because British cattle just hit the highest price on record. And here is the strange part. Take 2 of those packs, bought off the same shelf on the same afternoon, for the same money. Fry them side by side. One browns in the pan like beef your grandmother would recognize. The other floods the tray grey, weeps water and steams like a wet flannel. Same shop, same price. The same 3 words on the front of both. British beef mince. You would think the label has to tell you why one is honest and one isn't. It doesn't. Right now, it is perfectly legal for a supermarket to flush a tray of mince with gas, to hold it bright red long after it should have turned, to blend it from 2 different countries, and to print a British farm on the front that has never existed, and to tell you almost none of it. Because one of these shops sold a value beef burger that turned out to be nearly a 3rd horse, the single worst reading in the entire country. One had a banned horse painkiller found in the cheapest tin on its shelf the first time this nation ever found the drug in food. One of them owns its own slaughterhouse, and got that slaughterhouse filmed shocking, terrified cows with electric prods. One recalled its most expensive burger after a dozen people, some of them children, ended up in hospital with their kidneys shutting down. One got its own newspaper advert banned for swearing blind. It never had a problem. And on at least 4 of these shelves, the wholesome little farm printed on the front of your mince has an address that exists only in a marketing department. That is not a guess. That is the mince aisle of Britain's biggest supermarkets, right now. And every one of them is banking on the same thing, that you will never turn the tray over, and that even if you did, the label wouldn't give you the half of it. There was a time you watched a man in an apron mince it in front of you. You knew the shop, you knew the animal was British, and it lasted 2 days on the shelf because it was genuinely fresh. That man has gone from almost every supermarket in this country. What replaced him is a sealed plastic tray, trucked in from a factory hundreds of miles away, stacked by someone who has never once touched raw beef. So we did the thing no label will do for you. We lined up the mince from 11 UK supermarkets and asked 3 plain questions of every pack. Is there a butcher or just a machine? Is that farm on the front a real place? And is it, honestly, only British? 8 of them failed. 3 of them, I'll name them at the end, are the ones I would actually put in your freezer. We are counting down from number 8 to the single worst offender in Britain. So don't skip ahead. The biggest, most trusted name of the lot is last, and it is the one that started all of this. Let's open the tray. Number 8, farm foods. Nobody walks into a deep discount frozen shop expecting a man in a white apron, and farm foods doesn't pretend you will. It began life as a butcher's in Aberdeen and grew into more than 300 frozen stores, and I'll be straight with you, farm foods doesn't fail on lying. It fails on emptiness. There is no counter, no block, no knife. Every scrap of its mince is made in a factory you will never see, frozen into a box and driven to the aisle. The trade even has a word for it: case ready. The meat is cut, minced, weighed, priced and sealed in a central plant, then shipped to the shop ready to slap straight onto the shelf. One factory can feed hundreds of stores. From a spreadsheet, it's genius. From your frying pan, it's a coin flip because the tray is engineered to outlast your eyes. But look at what is actually in the box. Farm Foods ordinary mince, the Angus mince, the fresh beef mince, runs at 25 grams of fat in every 100. A quarter of the pack. Not the odd thread of marbling that makes a burger taste of something. A solid quarter. Reach for the cheap one instead of the leaner steak mince, and you are frying off more than twice the fat and paying beef prices for the privilege of pouring it down the sink. Then there is the burger. Farm Foods Scotch beef quarter. Pounders sound like the good stuff. Scotch beef, printed right there on the front. Read the ingredients, and the Scotch beef is 77% of it. The rest is onion, added beef fat, water, and wheat rusk, the dried cereal the trade uses to soak up moisture and pad out a patty on the cheap. So very nearly a quarter of the burger you are grilling for your grandchildren isn't the lean beef on the label. It is fat, filler, and water, pressed into a circle and frozen solid. And it's a shop with previous for packets that don't say what's really in them. In the past year alone, the food watchdog pulled Farm Foods' own label lines twice, once for undeclared milk, and once for undeclared shellfish and fish, allergens missing off the label. The kind of gap that puts the wrong person in hospital. And that little red tractor stamp everyone leans on for reassurance. It took a hit of its own. In October 2025, the Advertising Standards Authority ruled that Red Tractors Farmed with Care campaign was misleading, unsubstantiated, and exaggerated. 3 breaches of the code in a single ruling after campaigners produced Environment Agency figures showing Red Tractor assured farms were behind 62% of the most serious pollution incidents on record. The logo that is meant to mean cared for got banned for saying so. Farm Foods does at least name its beef Scotch and British, which is more than some names further up this list can be bothered to do. But that is the ceiling here, not the floor. Farm Foods isn't the villain of this story. It's the floor the rest are measured against. Everyone else on this list had a butcher, a promise, a reputation, and threw it away one quiet cut at a time. Farm Foods never had them to lose. That isn't a betrayal. It's a frozen box off a lorry doing exactly what it says on the front. One quick thing, worth 2 seconds. Like it and tap hype if you can see the button. Hyping a video is the single strongest signal you can send YouTube to put this in front of more shoppers. Number 7. Iceland. Remember that grey flood in the pan from the very start of this video, the tray that weeps water and steams instead of browning. Iceland is where you meet it head on. Iceland built its whole identity on one promise. Frozen is just as good as fresh. For a bag of peas, fair enough. For meat, that promise quietly falls apart because of something that happens the moment beef is frozen. Ice crystals form inside the muscle and burst the cell walls open. So when the heat hits it, all the water those cells were holding pours straight out. That grey puddle isn't a one-off bad pack. It is the physics of frozen mince, and it takes the flavour out with it. Then look at the burger. Iceland's standard quarter pounders, the 4-pack most families actually buy, are 79% beef. The rest is water, onion, wheat flour, and seasoning. Nearly a fifth of the thing is not beef at all, and here is the tell that it's a choice, not a limit. Iceland's dearer 100% British beef quarter pounders are 99% beef, with nothing but salt and pepper. They know exactly how to make an honest burger. They just make the cheap one on purpose. But the moment that really tells you who Iceland is came after the horse meat scandal. In early 2013, 2 samples of Iceland's own quarter pounders tested positive for horse DNA and were pulled from the shelves. And Iceland's response? It took out a newspaper advert declaring that no horse meat had ever been found in an Iceland product, and all its burgers were British beef. The Advertising Standards Authority banned it, ruled that the ad misleadingly rubbished the very food safety authority that had caught the horse in the first place. Caught with horse in the burgers, Iceland ran an advert denying it, and the watchdog ordered the advert pulled. On the same scandal, its founder went on Panorama and made a remark about the Irish that the company then had to apologise for. The cheapest own-brand mince on the shelf, meanwhile, is 23 grams of fat per 100, nearly a quarter fat, and the pack has quietly slipped from 500 grams to 450, while the price ticked the other way. And that loud British beef promise Iceland leans on. It only turned up weeks after the horse did, and even then the company admitted only its burgers and some ready meals were actually all British and wouldn't say when the rest would follow. The British badge was a reaction to getting caught, not a rule it started with. Iceland's customers are, by design, the ones shopping on the tightest budgets. Selling them a diluted, watered, shrinking product and then advertising your way out of the criticism, that's not frozen convenience. That's a shop that would rather manage the headline than fix the mince. Number 6. The Co-op. This is the one that likes to feel a cut above, the ethical shop, the members shop, the one your streets had since your nan's day, which makes what its own testing found in 2013 sting all the more. When the horse meat scandal broke, the Co-op pulled 2 of its own frozen beef burger lines and tested them. It found horse DNA in 4 of 17 samples, and one of them was 17.7% horse. Not a trace, nearly a fifth. The Co-op's own specification demanded 100% British beef, and it admitted on the record that the meat came from outside the UK. It sacked the supplier. But the burger with its name on it was 1 part in 6 horse. And this is a good moment to answer the grey versus red mystery from the top of the video, because the Co-op's fresh mince shows you the other half of the trick. That bright cherry red you trust in a chilled tray is very often not freshness, It's gas. The trade calls it modified atmosphere packaging. The tray is flushed with a blast of oxygen, around 70 to 80%, and the oxygen holds the meat a vivid red for 10 to 14 days, roughly double what it would naturally last. A butcher's mince lasts a day or two because it is genuinely fresh. That gas-flushed tray can carry a shelf life of well over a week, up to a fortnight, mince that looks identical to day-old stuff, and is many times the age. Here is the part they don't advertise. That same high oxygen gas makes mince cook brown in the middle before it is actually safe. It can look done at 57 degrees when it needs 71 to kill the bug that causes food poisoning. 2/3 of people judge a burger by its color. Barely 1 in 8 ever uses a thermometer. So the gas that makes the mince look freshest for longest is also the gas most likely to trick you into serving it pink in the middle to your family. The Co-op also had to recall its own British beef meatballs because they might contain pieces of plastic, a straight food safety recall on an own-brand British beef product. And the Co-op on the front of your mince. The beef is cut and minced by Dunbia, a division of Dawn Meats, the largest meat processor in the Republic of Ireland. And for all the ethical branding, the Co-op has backed welfare schemes since the 90s and set up its own beef group after the scandal to tighten things up. None of it stopped a 1 in 6 horse burger going out under its name in the first place. The values are on the wall. The horse was in the freezer. Here's the thing, though, and it's the one genuine point in the Co-op's favour. It calls its mince exactly what it is. Co-op British Beef Mince. No invented farm, no countryside fairy tale on the front. Hold on to that, because in about 4 minutes you're going to see what the giants do instead, and you'll understand why the Co-op, for all its faults, at least isn't lying to you about where the field is. Number 5, Morrison's. And this one is an outrage. It's disappointment, because Morrison's really was different. It is the only big supermarket left that owns its own abattoirs and its own farms. For years it had a proper butcher on Market Street in every shop, cutting and mincing British beef in front of you when every rival was quietly tearing that out. That was the whole point of Morrison's. Fewer hands between the field and the counter, which is exactly why this is the one you promised at the start. Morrison's owns its slaughterhouse, a business called Woodhead Brothers. In late 2022, undercover footage taken inside a Woodhead abattoir, the one Morrison's itself owns, showed panicked cattle being hit and shocked with electric prods and pigs beaten with paddles, all of it in plain view of the site's own CCTV and the government vet who is supposed to be standing there. The abattoir had a good food hygiene rating at the time. The one supermarket that boasts it owns its own slaughterhouse got its own slaughterhouse filmed abusing the animals inside it. And the thing that made Morrison's worth trusting is being dismantled as we speak. In 2025, Morrison's began closing its fresh meat counters, 72 of them, moving to what it calls a mostly pre-packed model, where a butcher fills a tray once at the start of the day and then disappears behind the plastic like everywhere else. 60 stores had switched by that summer, heading for 100. Meanwhile, the consumer champion, Which, caught Morrison's quietly cutting the beef in its premium. The best lasagna from 30% down to 26. Same box, same, the best label, a tenth less beef. And its cheapest Savers mince is 25 grams of fat per 100, a full quarter fat. Here is what makes it hurt, though. Morrison's still owns those abattoirs. It still buys direct from thousands of British farmers, still runs a scheme that puts named cattle on named finishing farms and pays a premium for it. The machinery of the good version is all still standing. It's just being quietly starved to feed the accountants. One closed counter, one thinner lasagna at a time. Because in 2021, Morrison's was taken over in a private equity buyout that loaded it with billions in debt. And debt is exactly what turns a proud butcher's counter from a point of pride into a cost to be cut. Morrison's is a genuinely good model being slowly hollowed out from the inside. What you're buying today is a fading photograph of what it used to be, which is the cruelest kind of decline, not a shop that never cared, but one that's forgetting it ever did. Number 4, Lidl. Now we're into the discounters that wrap themselves in the Union Jack and Lidl wraps tight. And this is where the price bites hardest because mince has climbed so fast, up a third in a single year, that shoppers are visibly flinching. A quarter of us have quietly dropped to the smaller 250-gram packs to soften the blow. sales of the fattier, cheaper 20% grade are climbing. And more people are abandoning beef mince altogether for chicken mince, sales of which have jumped by 2/3 in a year. Lidl sells itself as the answer to exactly that squeeze, the honest British bargain, so let's read the bargain. Lidl's mince is Birchwood, the wholesome-sounding farm brand on the pack. And here's the first problem, in plain law. Lidl's cheapest Birchwood mince is 25 grams of fat per 100. The reserved term minced beef has a legal ceiling in this country, a maximum of 20% fat. Lidl's cheapest is 25, a quarter over that ceiling, about as fatty as mince gets and still counts as beef. Nothing illegal about it, it's just the fattiest grind on the shelf, sold to you at meat prices. Then there's the Union Jack itself. Lidl's beef is British, that part is true, but the company that actually mince it and pack it and bank the margin is Dunbeer, owned by Dawn Meats of Ireland. So the British on your Lidl mince stops at the cow. The processing, the profit, and the decisions happen across the Irish Sea. And the disguise even changes with the postcode in Scotland. The very same beef wears a different invented name. Strathvale Farm. Two made-up farms for one real supplier, and the RSPCA assured welfare badge that Lidl and others lean on. In 2024, campaigners released undercover footage from 45 RSPCA assured farms, and the RSPCA's own president called what it showed indefensible. The welfare sticker older shoppers trust as a guarantee was, on those farms, the one being broken. Lidl was also there at the very start of the horse meat scandal. 3 of its own Moordale burger lines were on the first withdrawal list of 2013. Yes, it has since pledged £1.5 billion to British beef. Real money, a real commitment. But money spent marketing the word British doesn't change what's under the flag today. The fattiest legal grind minced by an Irish processor behind a farm name nobody's ever driven past. Birchwood isn't a farm. It's a flag stapled to a factory. Number 3, Sainsbury's. This is the one that should know better, and I mean that. Sainsbury's has spent decades positioning itself as the responsible choice, the shop for people who care where their food comes from, the one that charges a little more because supposedly it's a little better, which is what makes the burger so hard to defend. In 2017, a national outbreak of E. coli 0157, one of the nastiest strains there is, was traced to Sainsbury's own brand frozen beef burgers. Not the value range, the Taste the Difference Aberdeen Angus Quarter Pounders, their most expensive burger. 12 people fell ill, 8 were hospitalized, and 4 developed hemolytic uremic syndrome. That's when the toxins attack the kidneys and shut them down, and it hits children hardest. 30,000 packs had been made. The recall went out on the 22nd of December, 3 days before Christmas. And the investigators were blunt about one thing. This was not a cook getting it wrong at home. The contamination happened in the factory, and the cooking instructions on the pack were fine. It was the meat, not the kitchen. And this brings us back to the single most important thing to understand about mince, the thing that makes it different from a steak. On a steak, the bacteria sit on the surface, and searing the outside kills them. That's why a rare steak is safe. Mince is the opposite. The moment beef goes through the grinder, whatever was on the outside is dragged right into the middle. So a burger has to be cooked through properly every time, and that gas-reddened brown-in-the-middle trick from earlier is exactly how people get it wrong. Sainsbury's also decided in 2023 to vacuum pack all of its mince, sucking the air out so it turns a dark, dull purple. Shoppers hated it. Their own reviews called it a rectangle of mushed-off cuts, called it mush, and one simply said, the dog would not like it. Sainsbury's did it to save 450 tons of plastic a year, a genuinely good aim. It just managed to make the beef look like something you'd scrape into the dog's bowl while achieving it. And the label on the cheapest pack is a small masterpiece of saying nothing. British or Irish, made from a blend of fresh and frozen beef. British or Irish, fresh or frozen. You genuinely never know which is in your hand, and the single origin, honestly British pack is sitting right there on the same shelf, costing you more. The clarity is the upsell. The confusion is the cheap one. To top it, Sainsbury's shut every last meat and fish counter in 2020, and its budget meat hides behind an invented brand called J. James and Family, a family that is, of course, no family at all. For the shop that sells itself on knowing better, that's an awful lot it would rather you didn't know. We're down to the final two now, the two biggest, most trusted names of the lot. And if you've stayed this far, this is where it was heading all along. Number 2, Asda. Asda doesn't just sell cheap meat. It celebrates it, rollback prices, yellow stickers, the whole idea that paying less is always the clever move, no questions asked. So let's ask the question Asda would rather we didn't. Start with the tin, because this is the one from the top of the video. In 2013, Asda's Smart Price corned beef, the cheapest tin on the shelf, was withdrawn after it was found to contain horse DNA. Then it got worse. The Food Standards Agency confirmed that same cheap tin also contained phenylbutazone, bute, a horse painkiller that is banned from the human food chain outright. It was the first time this drug had ever been found in a retail meat product in Britain. Of everything the whole scandal turned up, the banned drug landed in the cheapest tin, in the shop that shouts loudest about the price. And Asda's supply chain tells you why it keeps happening. Every scrap of Asda's fresh own-brand beef, all of your mince, comes from a single supplier, ABP, the very company whose plant was at the center of the horse burger scandal in the first place. One supplier from the scandal for the lot. In the spring of 2020, when demand spiked, Asda was caught importing mince from Poland, while shoppers assumed they were buying British. Its farm stores brand is another invented farm. The Soil Association called it disgraceful. And its Brazilian corned beef was traced to a meat packer linked to illegal burning of the Amazon, which Asda declined to drop when Waitrose and Marks & Spencer both did. Then follow the money above the meat counter, because that's where the squeeze is set. Asda is now owned by private equity, loaded with debt from the buyout that took it private. Debt in a supermarket gets paid down one way, by leaning on the supply chain, and the first thing that gives when you lean on a beef supplier is the part you can't see on the shelf. The welfare, the sourcing, the margin that used to buy quality. Asda has leaned on that one supplier, ABP, for something like 45 years, and just re-signed for 6 more. Asda made a great show in 2020 of pledging to go 100% British. And that pledge tells you everything, because if going British is something you have to announce, it means for years you weren't. Industry data showed only around half of Asda's beef had been British not long before. And even as it made that pledge, the figure had reached just 3/4. For years, a good chunk of the British feel on that shelf simply wasn't. Asda has always known how to do it properly. It just decided that cheap and quiet was worth more than honest. And number 1, it could only ever be Tesco, the biggest grocer in Britain, the shop where 1 in every £4 this country spends on groceries goes through the till. This is the shop that started all of it. That value beef burger from the very first line of this video, the one that was nearly a third horse, was Tesco's. Tesco Everyday Value Beef Burgers tested at 29% horse DNA. Not a trace, not a rounding error, 29%. The single highest reading of the entire scandal in the cheapest burger the poorest families were buying. And it wasn't a one-off. Weeks later, Tesco's Everyday Value Spaghetti Bolognese was found to be more than 60% horse, made in the very same factory as a supermarket lasagna that turned out to be 100% horse, with no beef in it at all. And this was not a mix-up. When investigators finally followed the trail, the horse was being trucked out of a Romanian abattoir, relabeled as beef by traders across Europe, and sold on as the real thing, organised fraud, not an accident. Men went to prison for it. In London, a British businessman got 4.5 years for mixing horse meat into beef and selling it on. Over in the Netherlands, a Dutch trader got 2.5 years for doing exactly the same thing, on an even bigger scale. Different courts, different countries, same racket. It cost the food industry an estimated £850 million and wiped around 300 million off Tesco's own value in a single day. The whole thing was so far beyond a labelling slip that the government had to coin a phrase for it: food crime, and stand up a dedicated police unit inside the Food Standards Agency that is still running today. That is the scale of what went through the grinder. And of every product in the country, Tesco's was the burger with the most horse in it. Now the invented farm loop from the top of the video, this is where it pays off. In 2016, Tesco launched 7 farm brands, plastered across its meat and veg with wholesome, British-sounding names. Boswell Farms for the beef, Rosedene, Willow, Woodside, Nightingale. Every single one of them is fictional. They are not farms, they are logos. And the beef sold under Boswell Farms need not be British at all. The sister brands were sourced from the Netherlands, from Denmark, from Ireland. There is a real Boswell farm, and its actual farmer called it an abuse of power. The National Farmers Union was angry enough to refer the whole thing to trading standards, armed with a survey showing 3 in 5 shoppers who thought the products were British would feel deceived to learn they weren't. A wholesome farm printed on the front of your mince, with an address that exists only in a marketing department. That's not provenance, that's set dressing, and the law barely blinks. On a pack of mince, a supermarket doesn't even have to name a country. It is allowed to write origin, EU or non-EU, and leave it at that. A whole animal's life boiled down to 3 letters and a shrug. There is more, because at Tesco's scale, there is always more. In 2020, a beef mega-farm that supplied Tesco was filmed with workers hitting cows with pipes. In 2022, Tesco axed the meat, fish and deli counters at 317 stores in a single stroke. The last butchers, gone overnight. The mince now sealed into its trays hundreds of miles away by a single outside firm, Hilton Food Group in Huntingdon, and driven back out to the shelves. And here's the part that damns it hardest. When Tesco is caught, it moves fast, it dropped the horse supplier and suspended that farm within days, which is the most damning part of the whole story. Tesco is the one shop on this entire list with the power to fix any of this whenever it chooses. It led the whole industry into the anonymous, gas-flushed, fake farm meat case. It could lead everyone back out. It simply decided that scale was worth more than the butcher. When the biggest name in British food makes that choice, the whole aisle follows it down. That's not a supermarket. That's the shop that taught the mince to lie, and then taught everyone else how. So, those are the 8. Now, the 3 I promised, the ones I'd actually put in your freezer. Quick word on price first. These are what we found this week, and they'll drift a few pence, the verdicts won't. Start with the one that never sacked its butcher. Waitrose kept its proper meat counter open when the rest were ripping theirs out. And its mince is only ever British, from native breeds, Aberdeen Angus, Hereford, Welsh Black, raised with around 1/3 more space than the legal minimum. After the scandal, Waitrose did the opposite of everyone else. It built its own dedicated beef facility to shorten the chain, and it uses one processor so it can trace the animal back. It isn't cheap, its essential mince is around £3 to £4 a pack, and the native breed line dearer. But if you want to look a butcher in the eye again, Waitrose is one of the last places in Britain you still can. Is it spotless? No, a batch of its beef meatballs turned out to have pork in them back in 2013, and it was slow owning up to the regulator. But it was pork, not horse, and no horse was ever found in a Waitrose product. On the thing that matters most, a real butcher, real British breeds, a chain short enough to trace the animal back, it is the last counter standing. Then, if you're buying the meat for a proper meal, Marks & Spencer. Yes, it's dear, around £5.20 for its lean mince, near enough to what that record pack costs. But this is the shop that sailed through the entire horse meat scandal without a single positive test. It was already tracing every animal back to the individual farm while the giants were still working out what was in the burger. Its beef is 100% British and grass-fed, and this April it signed a £2.1 billion 10-year deal that backs 3,500 British farms. No invented farm names. When Marks & Spencer says where the cow lived, there's a real field behind the words, the one honest caveat. Even here the mince is machine-packed, not cut by a butcher in the shop. That counter's gone too. But of every big name in this whole video, Marks & Spencer is the one whose British you can take at face value. And here's the one that'll surprise you, because the cheapest shop on the high street is also one of the most honest about where the beef is from: Aldi. When the Farmers Union actually checked the shelves, 100% of Aldi's fresh beef was British, and 96% of it was proper Scotch, in the same survey where Asda was importing more than 1/4 of its beef. Aldi's lean British steak mince is about £3.29 for 500 grams, roughly £2 cheaper than that record pack, and its Nature's Glen line is the real protected Scotch article, carrying the protected origin mark that guarantees a Scottish farm behind it. Aldi also buys on long, fixed contracts from a small group of British farmers, a duller headline than a £1 billion pledge, but it often means more because a farmer who knows the deal is steady can actually afford to do it properly. Buy the plain British or the Nature's Glen mince, not the 25% fat value brick. And yes, the Ashfield farm name is invented like all the rest, but the beef underneath it is genuinely impeccably British. The cheapest till in the country, quietly beating the giants at the one thing they fake. And if the only big shop near you is Morrison's, yes, from earlier on this list, there's one exception worth knowing. Leave the sealed pre-packed trays. But if there's still a butcher on the Market Street counter mincing British beef in front of you, that is the honest version the rest of the shop is forgetting. Ask for it at the counter, not off the shelf. And one last thing, because it tells you exactly how much has actually changed. The last time British investigators raided a supplier for selling foreign beef as British, March 2023, the company collapsed owing nearly £5 million. As of today, not one single person has stood in a courtroom for it. Tell me in the comments which aisle we should pull apart next. Your suggestions decide what we investigate. Subscribe and stay with us, because we do this every week. Buy the mince a real butcher can still hand you. Back the shops that never sacked him and never settle for less than you and your family deserve.